In 1929, German psychiatrist Hans Berger attached two lead electrodes to the back of his patient's head. A paper strip from the recording device began tracing rhythmic peaks, the first ever recorded traces of electrical activity in the human brain. Berger expected that when the patient fell asleep, the needle would go still, registering absolute calm. Instead, the polygraph started scribbling erratic, violent curves. The sleeping brain wasn't resting. It was literally blazing with tension. While your body lies motionless, turning into heavy putty, inside your skull, a high-pressure emergency cleanup protocol kicks in. Sleep is not a passive battery recharge. It's a forced molecular filtration. Without it, your neurons would start rotting alive in their own waste products within 48 hours. Humanity spends billions of dollars studying Martian soil and launching orbital telescopes, yet we fumble when it comes to a mechanism that claims a third of our lives. Evolution ruthlessly eliminated any signs of weakness in species, but left this lethally dangerous shutdown mode untouched. A helpless, paralyzed creature in a dark cave, easy prey. But without this mode, survival proved physically impossible. We're beginning a detailed dissection of that darkness, step by step, moving through 6 isolated levels, from the first perceptual glitches to the quantum noise at the edge of consciousness. Subscribe while your brain can still process visual signals. We're descending. The descent starts the moment you close your eyes. You call it falling asleep and think of it as a pleasant relaxation. Physiology sees it differently, as a hard, forced disconnection of peripheral systems from the central processor. A localized conflict unfolds in your brainstem. 2 systems wage war for control over your synapses. The ascending reticular activating system fights to keep consciousness alive, flooding your blood with norepinephrine and acetylcholine. Opposing it is the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus. Its weapon, gamma-aminobutyric acid, a chemical brake. Once the concentration of this inhibitory neurotransmitter crosses a critical threshold, the relay flips. You lose the ability to pay active attention. In this transitional moment, hypnagogia, your senses begin to misfire. The first to fail is proprioception, your sense of body position in space. The brain loses calibration of limb weight. You might feel your arms have grown enormous, the pillow has dropped away, and your body is floating at an angle above the bed. This isn't mysticism, it's a signal delay between your tendon receptors and the parietal cortex. Next, the visual analyzer breaks down. Starved of external light, retinal neurons start firing chaotically. Phosphenes drift before your eyes, colored spots, geometric patterns, blurry faces. The brain, wired to find logic in everything, tries to assemble meaningful images from this noise. Hypnagogic hallucinations arise. You may hear someone clearly call your name in a completely empty room. Your fitness tracker registers a drop in heart rate and a 0.3-degree dip in skin temperature. The device sends a report to the server. You've fallen asleep. But the sensors don't see that right now your thalamus, the main filter of sensory information, is slamming the gates of perception shut. It's generating sleep spindles, cutting off any external sounds. On the EEG, K-complexes are recorded. If a motorcycle revs outside your window at this moment, this giant biphasic wave will suppress cortical arousal, preserving your isolation. You no longer belong to the real world. Physical decoupling is complete. The external interface is shut down. Your brain has locked all doors from the inside and braced itself for surgical intervention. This level of immersion forces us to confront the brutal mechanics of survival. While your consciousness wanders in the twilight zone, your body is switched to autonomous maintenance. Deep sleep begins, and the first thing your brain does is lock you inside your own skeleton. This process is called muscle atonia. It has nothing to do with ordinary relaxation after a hard day's work. It's a controlled chemical blockade, orchestrated with military precision. The isolation command comes from the sublaterodorsal nucleus in the brainstem. It activates special interneurons in the spinal cord, which start flooding motor synapses with glycine and gamma-aminobutyric acid. These molecules work like silencers. They cause hyperpolarization of motor neuron membranes, completely blocking the transmission of electrical signals from the cortex to the muscles. The signal to run or punch is born in your head, races down the nerve fibers, but hits a wall of locked synapses. The wiring is cut. Your body becomes an immobile biological sarcophagus. This safety lock is vital. Without it, every attempt to run in your sleep would result in an actual leap from your bed straight into a wall or bedroom furniture. When this mechanism breaks down, doctors diagnose REM, sleep behavior disorder. People with this condition physically act out their nightmares. They punch walls, scream, break furniture, and injure those sleeping next to them. Their safety lock is blown. Your immobility is what guarantees you survive until morning without fractures. But while your skeletal muscles are paralyzed, a process inside your skull begins that resembles heavy-duty municipal machinery at work. Neuroscientists call it glymphatic clearance. This isn't an abstract term. It's a real hydraulic storm under pressure. During wakefulness, your brain operates at full throttle, consuming a massive amount of glucose and oxygen. A byproduct of this activity is the accumulation of metabolic waste, defective proteins, including beta-amyloid and tau protein. During the day, your brain is too busy processing external information to spend resources on cleanup. But at night, the sanitation protocol kicks in. The main trigger for this cleanup is the locus coeruleus, a tiny nucleus in the brainstem. During deep sleep, it nearly stops producing norepinephrine. In wakefulness, this neurotransmitter keeps brain cells swollen. Without it, physical shrinkage occurs. Astrocytes, the supporting glial cells, reduce in size. The spaces between cells expand by as much as 60%. Your brain literally shrinks, making room for fluid flow. Into these microscopic, newly opened alleyways, driven by the pressure of your carotid artery's pulse, cerebrospinal fluid rushes in. The conductors of this wave are aquaporin 4 channels located on the feet of astrocytes. The CSF mixes with interstitial fluid, creating a continuous current. Imagine squeezing a soaking wet kitchen sponge in the jaws of a hydraulic press, only at a microscopic level. That crushing pressure forces all the protein waste out of your brain tissue into the venous sinuses and lymphatic system. If this process gets disrupted for even a few nights, that toxic debris starts to crystallize. Slowly, at about the speed your fingernail grows, roughly 1 micrometer per month, amyloid plaques begin to wrap around your synapses. After 30 years of this silent degradation, your elastic neural networks turn into a rigid, dead structure, and you lose your memory and identity completely. Every single night, your brain makes a choice: clean synapses or slow decline. If you've made it down to this layer and your brain hasn't boiled over from all the Latin and hydraulics, drop the word abyss in the comments. I need to know who's coming with me all the way to the bottom. Break time's over. We're going deeper, down to where the software starts to clash with the hardware. Level 3 of the dive takes us back to the origins of our species. Sleep isn't just a cleaning shift inside your skull. It's the oldest evolutionary survival gym in existence. In 1997, Finnish cognitive scientist Antti Revonsuo formulated the threat simulation theory. According to this idea, nightmares aren't random mental garbage. They're a virtual training ground where your brain rehearses survival skills. While your body lies perfectly still, your limbic system, the emotional core of your brain, runs interactive disaster scenarios. Our distant ancestors spent nights on tree branches under constant threat of falling or a sudden leopard attack. Evolution hardwired those scripts deep into your subconscious. That's why people all over the world still dream the same stories: falling into an abyss, fleeing an invisible pursuer, public humiliation, or losing your teeth. In the Paleolithic, losing a tooth wasn't a trip to the dentist, it was a death sentence. Inability to chew tough meat fibers led to starvation and death. Your brain still plays back those primal fears, stress testing your neural connections in a safe environment. You're training to survive while your sheets cool down. For centuries, humanity was completely clueless about the nature of this process, a massive chronological gap in knowledge. Aristotle thought sleep happened because of warm vapors rising from digested food. Those fumes traveled up the blood vessels to the head, cooled down there, and then sank back to the heart, switching off consciousness. This absurd, cardiocentric theory remained dogma for 2,000 years. It wasn't until 1929, when Hans Berger recorded the first electroencephalogram, that scientists realized the brain generates incredibly complex electrical activity during sleep. We'd been sleeping for centuries without understanding what was happening inside our own heads. Sometimes, this finely tuned system suffers a critical failure. The software and hardware fall out of sync. Your consciousness has fully booted up, but the chemical straitjacket of atonia is still locked tight. Welcome to sleep paralysis. You open your eyes. The bedroom looks completely real. You hear the ticking of a clock, see the street lamp light on the wallpaper, but you can't move even a finger. In that moment, your amygdala, the fear and threat detection center, registers your body's total helplessness and starts generating a signal of extreme alarm. The panic is amplified by a physiological factor. During REM sleep, the auxiliary breathing muscles in your rib cage are locked down by atonia. Your breathing relies entirely on the diaphragm. Because of this, taking a deep breath is physically impossible. It feels like your lungs are being crushed under a massive weight. Your brain, lacking a logical explanation for this suffocation, instantly generates a visual projection right onto your retina. It needs to justify your fear. In Japan, this is called kanashibari. In Scandinavia, the visit of the night hag Mara. In Russia, the mischief of the domovoi, who sits on your chest. The monster's appearance depends on your culture and the movies you've watched, but the neurobiological core is always the same. A dark silhouette in the doorway, a shapeless something crawling across the blanket, or a demon pressing down on your chest. It's just the visualization of your paralyzed intercostal muscles. You are looking at your own fear, materialized by your occipital cortex. It's a closed-loop nightmare, created by your own mind trying to explain a wiring glitch. The fourth level of immersion takes us beyond individual experience. We're used to thinking of our sleep as an isolated bunker, inaccessible to outsiders. But biology and theoretical physics force us to question that autonomy. When you fall asleep, you don't just disconnect from the network, you switch over to humanity's global internal server. In the early 20th century, Carl Gustav Jung introduced the concept of the collective unconscious. He suggested that beneath the thin layer of each person's individual memory lies a giant database of our species. It holds archetypes, symbols, and behavioral patterns common to all cultures. Modern evolutionary biology confirms this hypothesis without any mysticism. Our brain isn't born a blank slate. Millions of years of fighting for survival have left deep grooves in the structure of our DNA. Complex neural circuits responsible for recognizing predators, poisons, and social hierarchies are inherited. An infant who has never seen a snake in its life will show a sharp spike in cortical activity when presented with a similar silhouette during sleep. Sleep is the time when these deep evolutionary programs run a self-test mode. We see identical images not because our souls are telepathically linked, but because we're all running the same operating system, written millions of years ago. Sometimes, this shared system shows strange temporal anomalies. Most people have experienced déjà vu, that sudden, irrational feeling that the current moment has already happened before. And often that memory traces back to a past dream. Neuroscientists explain déjà vu as a trivial wiring glitch. One hemisphere processes a sensory signal a few milliseconds faster than the other. Because of this delay, the brain registers the fresh information twice and mistakenly files the second copy in long-term memory. The image seems familiar because you've already seen it, literally a moment ago. But theoretical physics offers a far deeper interpretation of this glitch through Hermann Minkowski and Albert Einstein's concept of the block universe. According to relativity theory, there's no hard separation between past, present, and future on a cosmic scale. Time is a static fourth dimension. Space-time is a single monolithic block where every event has already happened and exists simultaneously, like frames on a reel of film. Your birth, this moment, and your death are recorded forever. When we're awake, our consciousness moves through that film frame by frame. But during the desynchronization of deep sleep, when our external filters are off, the brain can pick up faint cognitive noise from neighboring sections of that timeline. That's how physics explains documented prophetic dreams. Abraham Lincoln wrote in his diary, in vivid detail, about his own funeral in the White House's East Room 3 days before John Wilkes Booth shot him. Writer Mark Twain dreamed of his brother Henry's death, lying in a metal coffin with a specific bouquet of white flowers, one single red bud burning at the center. A few weeks later, Henry died in a steamboat explosion and was buried exactly as Twain described. From the block universe perspective, these people weren't predicting the future. They just happened to peek past the edge of the current frame. Reality is static. The future is already written, and in our dreams, we sometimes trip over its drafts. This same mechanism explains the phenomenon of shared dreams between close people. The brain works like a complex radio antenna. Under certain biochemistry, it can tune into the same frequency. Sleep isn't an isolator. It's a shared multiplayer room on a server we all log into with the rest of humanity. The fifth level of immersion takes us down to the subcellular level, where classical neuroscience meets quantum mechanics. The physical nature of our mind might be far more complex than just electrical impulses jumping between synapses. At the end of the 20th century, physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff proposed the Orchestrated Objective Reduction Theory, or ORC-OR. They suggested that human consciousness arises inside microtubules, tiny protein structures that form the cytoskeleton of neurons. In their view, inside these hollow cylinders, tubulin molecules can exist in a state of quantum superposition. That turns our brain into a biological quantum computer of immense power. In 2001, cosmologist Max Tegmark published calculations that seemed to bury this hypothesis for good. He argued that the warm, wet, chaotic environment of a living brain would cause instantaneous decoherence, the collapse of quantum states due to environmental interference. Decoherence time in the brain is a tiny fraction of a second. Quantum effects vanish before a neuron can even fire. We're talking 10 to the minus 13th or minus 20th of a second. But later research on general anesthesia unexpectedly supported Penrose's side. It turned out that inert gases like xenon knock out consciousness by binding specifically to hydrophobic cavities inside microtubules. They physically block quantum vibrations in tubulin proteins. The brain stops computing consciousness. The portal closes. If the quantum brain model is correct, then we inevitably run headfirst into Hugh Everett's many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. According to this physical theory, the universe constantly splits into an infinite number of parallel branches at every subatomic event. All possible versions of your fate exist simultaneously. In one reality, you're listening to this voiceover. In another, you chose a completely different career. In a third, you died as a child. When you're awake, your brain's sensory filters are locked onto one frequency only, the frequency of your current reality. It's basic survival. But during sleep, when the prefrontal cortex shuts down and norepinephrine levels drop, that biochemical antenna starts to glitch. The focus shifts. The brain begins picking up interference noise and signals from neighboring branches of the multiverse. That explains why some dreams feel stunningly logical and physically tangible, even though the setting is completely unfamiliar. You walk down streets of unknown cities, have conversations with people you've never met, and remember details from a stranger's life story. In the quantum model, that's not your tired mind making stuff up. It's a live feed from the life of your alternate self in reality B or C. You've temporarily tapped into someone else's terminal. This hypothesis also sheds light on the kind of nightmare that jolts you awake in a cold sweat, heart hammering. Maybe at that very moment, in a parallel branch of reality, your doppelganger fell off a roof, went down in a plane crash, or burned alive. You caught their final quantum collapse. Thanks to quantum entanglement, the spike of their instantaneous death hit your receiver in this reality in an instant. You woke up screaming in your warm bed, thankful it was just a dream. But for another version of you, that was the real end. Level 6 drops us to the very edge of the abyss, where sleep stops being a metaphor and becomes the reality of absolute finality. The boundary between a temporary shutdown of consciousness and eternal darkness is much thinner than we want to believe. Right now, in specialized cryo facilities in Arizona and the Moscow region, hundreds of frozen bodies and detached heads float in Dewar flasks of liquid nitrogen at -196 degrees Celsius. Cryopatients, people who chose eternal cold over physical decay, hoping that future technology could thaw them and bring them back. For them, death is a very long, cold sleep without dreams. But if, hundreds of years from now, science can fully reconstruct the structure of a frozen brain, will the continuity of your self survive? Would it be the same person who closed their eyes back in the early 21st century? Physics and philosophy say no. A technological breakthrough would only create a perfect copy with an identical memory database. The original consciousness, interrupted by the icy collapse, would remain erased forever. The copy would wake up convinced of its own immortality, but the original would never know. Many people think dying in your sleep is the most peaceful, desirable way to go. But modern resuscitation science shows that transition involves a powerful neurochemical storm. There's a popular myth that at the moment of death, the pineal gland dumps a massive dose of the hallucinogen DMT, creating an illusion of the afterlife. That's false. The pineal gland is far too small to synthesize a psychedelic dose in the seconds of agony. Actually, during acute hypoxia, the brain goes through a glutamate storm. Neurons start firing chaotically, overloading NMDA receptors. This triggers a state of deep dissociation. The famous tunnel of light appears, a natural consequence of cells in the occipital cortex gradually shutting down from the periphery inward. You're seeing your own visual system's fading projection. But in those final seconds, time flows completely differently for a dying brain. We know that subjective time perception in dreams can stretch. In just 5 minutes of REM sleep, you can live through an entire day. In the moment of agony, when the last cortical neurons burn through their remaining ATP reserves, subjective time slows to infinity. The final dream of a dying brain stretches into a personal eternity. Heaven or hell, woven from your own life's fears, expectations, and memories. You will never know that you died. You'll simply remain in that last, endless dream. 2,000 years ago, the Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi fell asleep and dreamed he was a butterfly. He fluttered among flowers, enjoying his freedom, completely unaware of being Zhuangzi. When he woke up, he faced a disturbing thought. Was he a man who dreamed he was a butterfly, or a butterfly now dreaming it's a man? You don't have a single solid piece of physical evidence that the reality beyond your monitor isn't just another nested level of a prolonged dream. Every morning we take a leap of faith, open our eyes, and agree to play by the rules. But remember, the alarm clock will eventually ring for every one of us. Try tonight to catch that elusive moment of transition when your self dissolves into the darkness. And ask yourself, where exactly do you go when the lights go out?